I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy.
You can find previous podcasts and more information on a range of health topics at peoplespharmacy.com. There are some things we do every day, like brushing our teeth or washing our hands. Can we include exercise? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
We've all heard that exercising is important to stay healthy. Perhaps we've even experienced how it makes us feel good. How can we incorporate it into our daily lives?
Even people who have suffered an injury or a heart attack need physical activity to recover their strength and stamina.
People with cancer also benefit. Should oncologists include a personalized exercise prescription as part of the recovery program?
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, finding your exercise prescription for life.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, according to the CDC, seasonal influenza activity remains elevated across most of the country. Doctors often prescribe oseltamivir, also known by the brand name Tamiflu, to try to help patients recover more quickly. A meta-analysis just published in JAMA Internal Medicine compared the effects of two antiviral medications and placebo. The analysis covered 73 trials, with more than 34,000 participants treated outside of the hospital. The data show that baloxavir, also known as Xofluza, reduced the risk of hospitalization and reduced the duration of symptoms by about a day, with few or no adverse events. For outpatient treatment, a single dose is prescribed. Somewhat surprisingly, oseltamivir did not reduce hospitalization and appeared to increase adverse events. It does not appear to have reduced the duration of flu symptoms significantly.
Millions of people are now suffering from long COVID. There's new research from the RECOVER study that stands for Researching COVID to Enhance Recovery. The investigators studied volunteers who were infected by SARS-CoV-2 and roughly 1,500 participants who did not catch the COVID virus. People who came down with COVID-19 were more likely to develop myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome, abbreviated MECFS. The classic symptoms of this condition are unremitting fatigue, post-exertional malaise, brain fog, dizziness upon standing, and unrefreshing sleep. If this sounds reminiscent of long COVID, it is. People with long COVID suffer many, if not all, of the classic symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome. Patients with CFS have been distressed for decades because healthcare professionals have frequently dismissed their symptoms as psychosomatic. The new research from the RECOVER trial, published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine, demonstrates that these symptoms often occur as a physiological reaction to viral infections.
Scientists are using a new research tool known as mini-brains to learn more about dementia. These organoids are made of human brain cells cultured in a laboratory in a three-dimensional arrangement. They're revealing some previously unsuspected problems leading to Alzheimer's disease. The most recent issue of Science Signaling has a report on injury reactivating herpes virus in the organoids. The mini-brains had previously been subjected to mock infection with no virus or to low-level HSV-1 infection that they had apparently overcome. When organoids were subjected to blunt trauma, those with latent infections had a resurgence of virus. In response, they produced beta-amyloid, a common marker of Alzheimer's disease. The scientists conclude these data suggest that HSV-1 in the brain is pivotal in increasing the risk of AD, and that brain injury reactivates the virus in the brain.
Household products, personal care products like body wash and shampoo, even dietary supplements contain compounds that can mimic our hormones and cause trouble. A team of researchers in Nevada asked 140 adults to collect their urine for 24 hours. Then they analyzed the samples for endocrine disrupting compounds. People who used more products with ingredients of concern had higher levels of specific phthalates in their urine. Those who took more supplements had higher levels of methylparaben. The people who reported their health as fair or poor had higher levels of such compounds in their urine than those who said their health is good.
Concord grape juice has a long history as a vasodilator. Like cocoflavanols, grape polyphenols can make blood vessels more flexible. A new study analyzing data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey found that men who drink grape juice were less likely to experience erectile dysfunction. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. Do you brush your teeth every day? What about taking a shower or eating breakfast? Most of us think of these behaviors as part of our regular routines.
What about exercise? Too many of us relegate it to a special event that might or might not happen on any given day. If it's too cold or too wet or we're too busy, we may just skip physical activity, even though we know it's good for us.
To learn more about why exercise should be part of our daily hygiene, we're talking with Dr. Benjamin Levine. He's a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and a member of the Division of Cardiology. He holds the Distinguished Professorship in Exercise Sciences. Dr. Levine is the founding director of the Institute for Exercise and Environmental Medicine at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital, Dallas, where he also holds the S. Findlay Ewing Jr. Chair for Wellness and the Harry S. Moss Hart Chair for Cardiovascular Research.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Benjamin Levine.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here to chat with you about exercise and cardiovascular and life health.
Dr. Levine, you have said something that has just really grabbed my attention, and that is the idea that we should be making exercise a part of our daily, and here's the take-home word, hygiene, like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, or eating breakfast. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. Well, there are many things one does to stay healthy, and you just named a few of them. And globally, that refers to your personal hygiene, taking a shower, changing your underwear, eating a good diet, and exercise is a critical component of that. In my experience, people who think about exercise only as something that has to be added on at the end of the day and it's a burdensome thing, don't necessarily develop the habits to sustain a lifelong pattern of healthy physical activity.
Well, we're hoping that you can give us some ideas about how somebody might be able to get that habit going. So many people say, I'm much too busy to exercise, or it's too cold out, or it's too dark, or too wet, or too whatever it is. So, what should we be doing to counteract that reaction?
Well, that's certainly $1 million question, right? About how does one remain physically active in modern society? And I think, you guys have your show is called The People's Pharmacy. And in many ways, it's useful to think about exercise kind of like we think about a medicine, right? There's a dose response curve. That is,
Mm-hmm.
there's a minimal dose where if I just, stand up and walk back and forth in my office, that's not going to have much of an adaptation. And then once you pass that threshold, there's a dose response where the more you do, the fitter you become. And then there comes a point where if you do more, you don't necessarily get more benefit. And so finding that what that right sweet spot is is really important as you think about sustaining exercise for life. And we've done some interesting studies over the years. For example, one we did with our partners at the Cooper Clinic, where we looked at patients who'd been to the Cooper Clinic here in Dallas for 25 years. And each time they came there, the doctor asked them, how many times a week do you exercise? And we characterized those who did who did nothing as sedentary, people who did 2 to 3 days a week as casual exercisers, those who did 4 to 5 days a week as committed exercisers, and those who did more than that, 6 or 7 days a week, and competed in regular, either regional or competitions, we called that competitive exercise. And when you look at the sort of physiologic response to training, how it affects the blood vessels and the heart, doing 2 to 3 days a week had relatively little benefit. But doing at least 4 to 5 days a week was that sort of sweet spot dose where you preserve the youthful, let's call it stretchability or compliance of your heart and blood vessels. And that's a good marker, if you will, that everybody knows that as you get older, your skin gets stiffer, your joints get stiffer, and your heart and your blood vessels do as well. And so one of the outcomes that we look at is the stiffness of the circulation as a way of preserving youthful cardiovascular structure and function. And it's not just that physiology. I mean, you all know, and many in your audience, I'm sure, will be aware that exercise does lots of things. We call that pleomorphic. So, of course, it's required to be fit and to be able to do physical activity at the intensity and duration that you desire. But it does all sorts of other things, right? It reduces your risk of having colon cancer or breast cancer. It reduces your risk of diabetes or hypertension, of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. And of course, it makes you strong and fit. So if I could give you a pill that would do all those things, everybody would take it, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, you bet.
And there you go. So trying to figure out how you integrate exercise into your life is really the challenge, and everyone's got to do it differently. You all may have seen what I call my exercise prescription for life, which involves really a diversity of physical activities over the course of a week. So I recommend that you take one day and do something that's fun, that lasts for an hour or so. And I don't really care what it is. It could be going for a brisk walk with your spouse. It could be going out and square dancing. It could be playing tennis or pickleball, anything that lasts at least an hour and is fun. I recommend that at least one day a week be something that is of higher intensity. I happen to like something called the 4x4, which is an old Norwegian ski team workout where you spend 4 minutes going as hard as you can for those 4 minutes, followed by 3 minutes of recovery, repeated 4 times. And that's a way of really challenging and stressing the entire system from the lungs to the heart to the skeletal muscles.
Well, wait a second, Dr. Levine. What do you do for those 4 minutes?
Well, so me personally, I have 12 pieces of equipment in my house. So I will bike or row or downhill ski or cross country ski or climb or jump rope or go out for a run or ride on the bike or go out onto the track. So it's wherever I happen to feel like that day. And some days I'll do all 4 minutes on one device each time. Some days I'll mix that up. I may do 4 minutes on the bike and 4 minutes on the rower and 4 minutes on the skier and 4 minutes on the climber. So I mix things up, and I find that helps reduce my risk of injury and also sort of keeps things fresh and helps me be able to pay attention to what I'm doing and stay focused. And it doesn't have to be a 4x4. Anything that requires you to do something kind of as hard as you can do it for a fixed period of time and then followed by recovery. So 4x4 is great. You could do 2x6 or 2x8 if you feel rambunctious. Um, and some people even recommend doing 30 seconds to a minute as hard as you can do it. And that these things train multiple different kinds of systems within the body.
And what do you do on the other days?
Well, so my long effort on the weekend is I'm a competitive tennis player, so I go out and play tennis on Sundays, or I'll go out for a long bike ride. So I'll pick one of those things that gets me outside generally for at least an hour, sometimes a little bit longer, hour and a half or 2 hours, and then on at least 2 or 3 other days, I'll do the classic moderate intensity exercise for 30 minutes using the talk test. That is exercising hard enough that you're a little short of breath. You can talk, but you can't sing. That's my moderate intensity exercise. And I'll do that another 2 or 3 days a week.
So I'm assuming, Dr. Levine, that would be something similar to what you're doing for the high intensity, only not so hard.
Yeah, it could be. That's exactly right. It could be on any one of an exercise devices, or, you can go out and do it on the street or with your running shoes or a bike or anything. That's right. The actual device itself or the strategy you take is not that important. And then I do think everyone should do at least one day a week of some sort of strength training. And that doesn't have to be going to the gym and pumping weights. It could be strength yoga or Tai Chi or anything that requires sort of sustained or higher intensity muscle contraction to preserve strength and balance.
You're listening to Dr. Benjamin Levine. He's a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and a member of the Division of Cardiology. Dr. Levine holds the Distinguished Professorship in Exercise Sciences. He's the founding director of the Institute for Exercise and Environmental Medicine at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital, Dallas, where he also holds the S. Finley Ewing Jr. Chair for Wellness and the Harry S. Moss Heart Chair for Cardiovascular Research.
And I love the idea that Dr. Levine encourages, things that we love, like tennis in my case, which I love to play on the weekends. After the break, we'll hear about the Dallas Bed Rest and Training Study.
Heart attack patients used to be confined to bed rest. No longer. Doctors' advice has changed dramatically, in part because of the Dallas Bed Rest Study.
Now, people are encouraged to start cardiac rehabilitation fairly soon after a heart attack.
Are some people too old to benefit? Or what about injury? How long do you need to recover, and how can you avoid losing fitness? You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
This podcast is made possible in part by CocoVia, backed by 20 years of scientific research and the maker of the most proven and concentrated flavanol extract in the market today, Coco Pro Cocoa Extract. Cocoa flavanols are among the most studied plant-based bioactives today and are clinically proven to promote cardiovascular and brain health for the long term, supporting a strong heart and better memory.
Get 15% off your order of any CocoVia product by using the discount code PPOD15. Learn more at CocoVia, and remember that discount code is PPOD15.
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by CocoVia dietary supplements. CocoVia Cardio Health is offered in both convenient capsule and powder formats, with each serving containing 500 milligrams of cocoflavanols to support heart health. More information at cocovia.com.
Have you ever had an injury that put you out of commission for a few days or weeks? A broken bone or a recovery from surgery can slow you down. Did you notice that you lost strength and endurance over that time?
Heart attack patients used to be treated with kid gloves. They were warned not to exert themselves.
That did not turn out to be good advice.
Our guest today helped revolutionize post-heart attack recovery. Dr. Benjamin Levine is a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center and a member of the Division of Cardiology. He holds the Distinguished Professorship in Exercise Sciences.
Dr. Levine, we're hoping that you can tell us about the Dallas Bed Rest and Training Study. What was it and what did we learn?
So the Dallas Bed Rest and Training Study was really one of the most important studies in our field. Back in the mid-1960s, my mentors, Jerry Mitchell, Gunnar Blomquist, Bengt Saltine, took 5 young men, put them to bed for 3 weeks, and then trained them for 2 months. And almost everything we know about the adaptive capacity of circulation really initially derived from that study. Now I was only 10 years old when that study was done, so I didn't have anything to do with the original. But back in 1996, we found those same 5 guys and brought them back to Dallas now 30 years later. And to our great surprise, not a single person, not one, was in worse shape after 30 years of aging than they were after 3 weeks of bed rest when they were in their 20s. So 3 weeks of bed rest was worse for the body's ability to do physical work than 30 years of aging. And that observation is one of the things that has stimulated my work for the past 20 years. It's why we try to look at people who have not been sedentary, but have done different kinds of exercise, different frequencies over their lifetime. We have shown that if you put someone to bed, but exercise them while they're in bed, you can completely prevent that cardiovascular deconditioning response, which consists of shrinking and stiffening of the heart. The blood vessels lose some of their resiliency and their ability to relax or vasodilate to get more blood into whatever organ needs it. It's something we call endothelial function that rapidly deteriorates. You increase sympathetic nervous system activity, the fight or flight response. So there's lots of things that happen. The human body is really good at preserving the structure it needs to manage day-to-day activity. And so if all you do is lie around in bed, that's all your body ultimately ends up being able to do.
Dr. Levine, there are a lot of people who say, well, I'm just so busy, or I'm kind of, dealing with some back issues or some knee issues. And so they've been inactive for a fairly long period of time. You have written that if you start recovering after, for example, an injury or after you've been inactive for a long time, you can regain some of that benefit. Can you give us some sense of what you need to do and how long it needs to take if you're recovering, for example, from an injury?
Sure. Well, of course, I can only give you general comments without dealing with the specifics of an injury or a medical problem, which obviously will dictate much of what you can and can't do. But a good policy is to start slow and build up gradually. So, an easy thing to do is to start with a gradual, easy walk. Or if you have, even if you have trouble standing or become lightheaded, you can start by exercising sitting down on a semi-recumbent bike. Do 5 minutes at a time, then recover, then do another 5 minutes. You want to get at least 20 minutes to 30 minutes of a stimulus to get an adaptation to it. But we would start nice and easy, that is, in a level where you can talk easily and are not short of breath, and build up to being able to do that 20 to 30 minutes 3 times a week, then gradually increase to 4 times a week the next week or the next month, and then increase the intensity on 1 day a week. This is sort of basic training principles, where you increase frequency, duration, or intensity, but a little bit at a time, and only one thing at a time as you gradually build up.
Now, I want to ask you about heart attack patients because
Mhm.
there was a time in this country when, if you've had a heart attack, you were basically confined to bed rest for days and
Yeah, for
sometimes even
weeks.
longer. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. That thinking is now pretty much passe. What do you do, and how do you instruct your colleagues about what to do if somebody has a heart attack?
Sure. Well, in fact, the Dallas Bed Rest and Training Study was one of the most important pieces of knowledge that changed how we think about managing patients with heart attacks. We used to think that after a heart attack, the heart was at risk for rupture, but we know that certainly is not true. And so, after a heart attack, the first thing that we do immediately, as soon as the patient has no longer has any symptoms, is we start by getting them out of bed. Just sitting out of bed in a chair is the best place to start. And then each day they do a little bit more. They may walk around the room the first day, and then out in the hall the second day, and then multiple times around the hall the third day. And when they're able to do those kind of activities, we put them into something called cardiac rehabilitation. That is one of the most important, let's call it interventions, but it could be just like any other medication that you take after a heart attack, is to go through cardiac rehab. Medicare and most insurance companies will pay for 3 months of regular training under the guidance and supervision of a nurse and an exercise physiologist with a cardiologist or physician in the background. And you'll get an exercise prescription. Remember, I told you at the beginning that we think about exercise like a drug that needs to be prescribed. So we'll prescribe it and gradually build people up over a period of about 12 weeks. It can be done faster if you were fitter before the heart attack. But then after those 12 weeks, you then are released to go back into a progressive exercise program on your own. And these are the different phases of cardiac rehab. The first phase is what happens in the hospital, getting out of bed, easy moving around the hallway, making sure that there are no new symptoms that develop. Phase two is the 12 weeks of outpatient, supervised, monitored cardiac exercise. And then phase three is the supervised but unmonitored, where someone might go to a gym but doesn't need a cardiac monitor, and gradually and progressively increases their independence.
I'm assuming they're all really important. I do want to ask about another aspect of exercise, and that is there are a lot of baby boomers in this country still. They are getting old. Um, they're in their 60s, they're in their 70s. Are they too old to benefit from an exercise program?
Absolutely not. I think that if you wait until you're 70 to start an exercise program, it's hard to reverse 7 decades of sedentary behavior. So we've tried that. We took people who were completely sedentary most of their lives, and they did struggle to. We really were unable to reverse at least the stiffening of the heart and blood vessels. But even in them, we were able to make them fitter and improve the ability of the heart to pump blood to the muscles. We find that there's another sweet spot in late middle age where the body still retains some plasticity to return towards more youthful cardiac structure. Um, and so if somebody or anyone who's listening in your audience is in that late middle age, that 50 to 65, or 40 to 65 range, where they say, I think it's time for me to to get in shape, but I'm worried that it won't be effective. I can assure you that's not true. We did indeed take a large group, almost 60 men and women who had been sedentary their whole lives, and we were able to put them over 2 years on a gradual, progressive training program and reverse the effects of sedentary aging. Even if you're older and can't reverse everything, you can still get fitter, stronger, and at least delay or forestall the debility that's associated with advanced age.
Dr. Levine, there are about 100 million people who have high blood pressure. How can exercise help get people with hypertension back down to better control, if not perfect control?
So, exercise is certainly part of the management of hypertension. It's not going to cure your blood hypertension if your blood pressure is in the 160s or 170s. So, we can't really think of exercise as a cure for hypertension. But what we can do is think about the lifestyle modification that's necessary to do our best to manage blood pressure, and that is to get enough physical activity, to get that 150, 2.5 to 3 hours a week of moderate intensity activity. What that does is helps to relax the blood vessels. It's the tightening of the blood vessels that causes hypertension in the first place. So that's really important. It's also very important in weight control that if you need to make sure that you've got adequate caloric output, and then in the same context, you have to restrain your caloric intake. But a mixed combination of paying attention to a good diet, increasing your regular physical activity, controlling and managing your body weight are all great ways of enhancing the efficacy of medication if you need it, and in some people, even preventing the need for medication.
And how about strength training? Does that have any value with hypertension?
Yeah, I think strength training has value in and of itself. And like I said to you previously, strength training is an important part of preserving your vitality and your functional independence. There are some studies suggesting that strength training by itself may even be more beneficial for hypertension than endurance training. I'm a touch skeptical of that. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? No athlete does just one kind of training. And the best way to approach healthy living is a combination of endurance training, strength training, and good attention to diet and personal hygiene.
Dr. Benjamin Levine, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Dr. Benjamin Levine, professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center and a member of the Division of Cardiology. He holds the Distinguished Professorship in Exercise Sciences. Dr. Levine is the founding director of the Institute for Exercise and Environmental Medicine at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital, Dallas, where he also holds the S. Finley Ewing Jr. Chair for Wellness and the Harry S. Moss Hart Chair for Cardiovascular Research.
We turn now to Dr. Claudio Battaglini. He is a professor of exercise physiology and director of the Graduate Exercise Physiology program at UNC. Dr. Battaglini is co-director of the Exercise Oncology Laboratory in the Department of Exercise and Sports Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's also a member of the UNC Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Claudio Battaglini.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Dr. Battaglini, I wonder if you could kind of give us some idea of the difference between, let's say, an exercise physiologist, such as yourself, a physical therapist, and a physical or personal trainer. What role does each specialty play?
Okay. Well, that's a great question to begin. So the exercise physiologists are the ones that study the acute and chronic adaptations to exercise training on the physiology of humans, but there's some that also work with animal models and things like that. So the knowledge that we gain and learn through those experiments and throughout our careers help the personal trainers to really use that knowledge, to implement those exercise sessions for their clients and so forth. So the physical therapists also overlap in many different ways, but they are more specific in terms of rehabilitating individuals that have had suffered, an injury, or not only that, but rehabilitate individuals that have gone to different types of treatments that had significantly reduced their functionality overall. That's where the physical therapist coming in and try to, rehabilitate those individuals that unfortunately end up,
And the personal trainer?
and the personal trainer are those that are trained to really improve the health of the individuals through the implementation of structured exercise training. So they're the ones that really study and get the knowledge to apply, all the knowledge in physical exercise and deliver the interventions to their clients.
Well, it sounds like you research physiologists
Mhm.
do the basic research, and then the personal trainers and the physical therapists do application and implementation.
That's correct. I think so. Although there are physical therapist researchers as well,
Mhm.
they do a really good job in learning different ways to maximize their therapies to their patients.
Now, I am interested in the sorts of patients because you're not just a researcher. You also have patients that you work with. Is that correct?
That is correct. Right. I almost function almost as a clinician as well,
Can you
delivering. Yeah.
tell us about that? What sorts of problems are people bringing to you and how do you help them?
Yeah. So I am actually one of the first generation exercise oncologists in the United
Ah,
States.
Oh,
So
wow. So that is a super specialist primarily dealing with cancer patients.
correct. That's exactly right.
Oh,
And
that's so exciting because it turns out exercise really makes a difference.
yes, we continue to learn. The area of exercise oncology now, it's in its 35th, almost getting to the 40th year. We have learned a significant amount. There are incredible researchers worldwide doing research and examining the effect of exercise in multiple physiological systems, but also, understanding, the benefits, long-term benefits for patients.
Well, I think almost everyone knows exercise is good for your heart. And we've been learning that exercise is good for your brain. But I think it still comes as a bit of a surprise to learn that exercise is really critical when it comes to cancer. Can you tell us in what ways, both prevention and treatment?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we have learned in exercise oncology throughout the years is that making the patient healthier overall, there are tremendous benefits to that alone, right? We know a little bit less of the real impact of the disease on the long-term prognosis of these patients. However, we all believe by looking at our own patients and seeing how well those that are exercising end up doing compared to those that don't do much, it does lead us to believe that yes, exercise really helps in multiple levels, not only physically with their functionality, but the mental aspect of the disease itself. Results across the board has shown, significant improvements in anxiety, depression, physical functioning, etc.
it seems to me that there may be some special, interesting situations when you're working with a cancer patient because often the treatments the cancer patients are undergoing may make them exhausted. They might not feel like exercising. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, this is a good point. Many years ago, when I started my career 30 years ago, I found some resistance for certain physicians exactly for that particular point that you make. Patients are so tired, we don't want them to exercise. And we slowly were able to convince them that, look, moving and maintaining their functionality may pay good dividends for the patients. And eventually, the medical community became very interested by looking at the initial results and seeing how the patients were performing and doing much better. So today, The medical community wants it. They really support, the exercise programs to be implemented in cancer centers. And here at UNC, at the hospitals, we have exercise facilities for the patients, but you make a good point. The important point to make, though, is that when they exercise, believe it or not, they feel better than not exercising. So that fatigue that 95% of the patients end up experiencing, it's significantly alleviated by exercising. So
You're listening to Dr. Claudio Battaglini. He is professor of exercise physiology and director of the Graduate Exercise Physiology program at UNC. Dr. Battaglini is co-director of the Exercise Oncology Laboratory in the Department of Exercise and Sport Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
It's time for a short break. Then we'll hear if there's evidence that people who exercise regularly are at a lower risk for cancer.
How would exercise fight cancer?
Dr. Battaglini customizes exercise routines for his patients. Find out what's important for them.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut, types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers.
Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety.
Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, soups, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping.
And the best part, Native Path Collagen offers amazing bundle deals. With this special link, you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands.
With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipes, or ingredients, and you'll speak to a real person ready to help.
Join their private Facebook community to share success stories, recipes, and support each other on this journey called life.
Visit getnativepath.com/PPOD and start your transformation today. That is GetNativePath.com/PPOD. GetNativePath.com/PPOD.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by CocoVia Dietary Supplements. CocoVia Memory Plus is formulated with 750 milligrams of cocoflavanols, a level clinically proven to improve 3 different types of memory and support brain function. More information at cocovia.com.
Our topic is how and why we should incorporate physical activity into our daily routine. We've already heard about the benefits of exercise for the cardiovascular system. We're now considering how exercise can be especially helpful against cancer.
We're talking with Dr. Claudio Battaglini. He is professor of exercise physiology and director of the Graduate Exercise Physiology program at UNC. Dr. Battaglini is co-director of the Exercise Oncology Laboratory in the Department of Exercise and Sports Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's also a member of the UNC Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center.
Dr. Battaglini, is there evidence that people who exercise are less likely to come down with cancer? Obviously, we can't blame anybody's cancer on them, but are they just at lower risk?
Yes, absolutely. There's epidemiological data from many, many years and consistently showing us that people that do exercise on a regular basis, they tend to be in a less they're less likely to develop different types of cancers. So if you think about what are the major factors that always come across those epidemiological studies being the main cause of cancer, first number one would be tobacco usage and cigarette smoking. There's a high association with cancer in that the individuals that use those products, right? But second is diet, and then third, exercise. So individuals that are physically active tend to, in a a general scheme of things, be less likely to develop different types of cancers. There are many different biological mechanisms that potentially explain that, which we can
Tell
talk
me
about.
more. I want to know how this
Okay.
works.
So there are different biological mechanisms, and I'm going to give you just a couple examples to put this into perspective. For example, if you look at breast cancer survivors, right, most of the diagnoses are associated with estrogen. And a lot of cancer types, breast cancer types, right, they're estrogen dependent. And so it makes sense that if we could reduce the overall lifetime exposure to estrogen, it would reduce the chances of somebody to get breast cancer. So if you think about fat cells, in obesity, fat cells produce estrogen on their own. So if you exercise and you reduce your percent body fat, that could potentially be one biological mechanism to reduce lifetime exposure and therefore put the patient at a lower risk to develop breast cancer. Let's talk about another type of cancer, for example, colorectal cancer, for example, or stomach cancer, right? So when you exercise, you're more prone to have a better digestive system. You go to the bathroom to void more often. So you decrease the time of exposure to carcinogenics that you eat, right? A lot of processed foods and things that are not really healthy to your body. But the exercise promote this better bowel movement. So you are, voiding more often, and therefore you're reducing the exposure to those carcinogenics that can lead to the development of those types of cancers.
That makes so much sense. And now I want to turn to cancer patients because, as Terry asked before, a lot of times when people are undergoing chemotherapy or some of the new monoclonals and immunotherapy and radiation, they don't want to get off the couch. I mean, it's exhausting. But you've pointed out that exercise actually makes people feel better. Now, they have to pace themselves, of course, and as they get better over time and recover, they'll have more energy and be able to exercise more. But the real bottom line is, how does exercise reduce the likelihood of a recurrence, and which cancers are most, shall we say, responsive, that is to say, less likely to recur with exercise?
Or possibly most studied?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. So in terms of recurrence, okay, the same biological mechanisms that was postulated, explaining how we can prevent cancer applies very similarly to the recurrence process. And if you think about breast cancer survivors that exercise at least about 30 minutes most of the days of the week at low intensity to moderate intensity exercise, research has shown that that level of physical activity is enough to decrease the likelihood of a potential recurrence. So if you talk about colorectal cancer, the level of activity seems to be needed to minimize a potential recurrence, seems to be a little bit higher. We need to exercise for 45 minutes in a little bit of a higher intensity. There's an incredible study that was performed a few years back by Dr. Fredrickson that have looked at the association between the amount of physical activity levels and prevention of a potential recurrence. And, it does sound like certain types of cancer are exercise dosage dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe perhaps exercise in breast cancer patients too much may not be ideal, or, exercise too little may not create the benefit that we're looking at. So, but all of those studies continue to occur, and we're learning more and more
So
as time
we've
goes.
got breast cancer,
Mhm.
we've got colorectal cancer. What about prostate cancer?
Prostate, very similar. That's a great question. The mechanisms and the intensity of exercise that seems to minimize potential recurrence in prostate, because most of the studies to date have been done in breast, which is a high incidence of cancers. There are a little bit, patients are treated on an outpatient basis, so it's easy for us exercise physiologists to work with those individuals. But there's a great group here at UNC led by Dr. Hinson, in Australia by Dr. Daniel Galvin and Robert Newton, that specializes in prostate. And it has been remarkable now that the numbers of prostate studies in exercise have grown, and we're learning more about it. And it seems like the benefits are very promising, very similar to different types of cancer. So, yes, if you ask me, do prostate cancer patients should be exercising? In my mind, I have no doubt that the answer would be yes, absolutely.
And this is not like touchy-feely stuff, feel-good stuff. I mean, this is solid scientific data. These are researchers who have looked at the data and they said at the end of the day, in quotes, or month
At
or
the end
year,
of the
at
study.
the study, there's a difference.
Oh yeah, no doubt. There's markers that they're measuring, from the beginning of the experiment to the end, some clinical markers, some patient-reported outcomes, some physical fitness markers, that tend to lead in that direction of being very positive responses, right? But let me make one thing very clear, though. As much as we believe that exercise is great for cancer patients, which I personally believe that after doing research for 30 years, we need to understand that by promoting better health, giving the patients to have the best quality of life that they can possibly live in the context of their disease, that's what matters the most.
Mm-hmm.
Get them to be healthy as possible, live longer with minimal side effects, live a great quality of life. At the end of the day, that's what matters. And the results seems to point in that direction.
And I'm going to guess that there's a hard to define piece of this equation that has to do with mental reaction to exercise. The effect of being exhausted or just exercising to your capacity that makes you feel good.
Oh, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. When the patients are going through the harsh nature of the treatment, right? Chemotherapy, radiation therapy, a combination of those treatments, they're fatigued. I mean, 90 to 95%, 70 to 95% of patients experience a very debilitating fatigue. But when they start exercising, they do feel better. So just to give a very encouraging statistics here, it seems that adherence to exercise programs for cancer patients are higher even than cardiovascular disease patients that have to go to cardiac rehab. Why? Because the patients feel good. They're tired, but they know that after the exercise, they feel, oh, I feel great. So they want more. And they keep coming and coming. And the adherence to participation in our exercise programs tend to be very high.
So far, we've been talking about populations. We've been talking about epidemiology, and you can lower the risk of, this group of patients if they exercise. They're less likely to have a recurrence. They feel better. I'm assuming that for individual patients, and I might be assuming wrong, am I correct to assume that you work with individual patients and help them develop programs for their specific situation? And if that's the case, would you tell us about one person you have worked with? You don't have to use their name.
Oh, absolutely. So many years ago, 2006, we founded the Get Real Heal Breast Cancer Rehabilitation Exercise Program at UNC. Since then, we have been working with cancer patients, for now over 20 plus years, right? And we learn a tremendous amount. Yes, our program although they work out in groups of 5 and 6, and there's a reason for that as well, they're very individualized. They are designed to fulfill the needs of each patient. And it's fascinating to see that the individualization is extremely critical. Some patients, like you said, might be more fatigued. They're not able to tolerate an X amount of exercise. Other has some functional limitations that you need to address too. But
Mhm.
we do customize exercise as much as we possibly can, while you're serving a large number of patients. So I believe that in cancer and exercise, we should be doing very similar to what we do to athletes, right? There's a very specific regimen that they will undergo to maximize the benefits of the
And do you
intervention.
remember a sort of model patient, someone who comes to mind where exercise made an especially valuable difference in their lives?
Oh, absolutely. I have many examples of those patients, but one that I recall, one of the first patients that I worked with at UNC, she used to be a lawyer in New York and then came and went a completely different lifestyle at UNC. She was very scared about the cancer. And then when she started exercising, you could see the difference, the level of confidence, they changed her lifestyle, the whole family come together. It's a beautiful thing to see, going from being terrified and scared about dying from a disease and really reach levels of accomplishments in life. And she continues to do great things in life. So that's very encouraging to all of us. That's why we work for.
Dr. Battaglini, you said that you have your breast cancer patients working together in small groups,
Mhm.
5 or 6 uh, women, I'm assuming mostly,
Correct.
at a time. And you said there's a reason for that. I hope you will share that reason.
Oh, absolutely. When we started the program, we were very, very one-on-one. We had students. I have a lot of my students coming in and working on a one-on-one basis with the patients. But these patients are going through a lot of change in their lives, hormonal changes and functionality changes, relationship changes. And those patients really don't like to talk to the trainer, even more so if it's a male or female, it's not comfortable. And at the end of the program, we have a questionnaire asking about the satisfaction of the program. What can you do to improve the program? And consistently came that, well, we love the program, we love the trainers, but we don't interact with each other. And we need to develop the social network. When I started reading that consistently, I said, that's it. We're going to change the program. We're going to exercise them into groups. So just to give an insight on how successful that became, the first day we implemented the program, there's 5, 6 ladies exercising. At the end of the exercise, they went to the parking lot and they stayed in the parking lot for over 2 hours. And then at that time, I said, that's it. We did the perfect job. This is exact what needs to happen.
Dr. Battaglini, are there differences between the benefits that we get from the different sorts of exercise? We have aerobic exercise, we have high intensity exercise, we have resistance, presumably strength training, and they all do different things. Do we get different sorts of benefits from them?
So there are benefits of all of those forms of exercise. Okay. The key here is the dosage of the exercise. So we're not doing too little or not doing too much with the patient, which is always a very fine line that we learn as much as we go along with the patients. But with all these years with my experience, and I recommend the guidelines from the American College of Sports Medicine, it states that cancer patients should be exercising most of the days of the week at low to moderate intensity for aerobic exercise and incorporating resistance training as part of the exercise training regimen, very similarly to the recommendations of an adult in the United States. So, to the second portion of the question, right? You said
Mhm.
that, remind me just for a
Okay,
second.
so the second portion of the question was, um, what are the various benefits? And, I'm assuming there are no real downsides for healthy people doing these various types of exercise. How do we know which types of exercise we need?
Right, right. Well, basically, the current guidelines is set forth, by by the Department of Health and Human Services, in American called SportsMed, which is the biggest organization ruling exercise. You know, the guidelines they're setting in based on science. So in those 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise spread out throughout 2 weeks, aerobic exercise, like you said, in the combination of resistance training, it seems to be the most adequate, the most recommended way to do this for you to attain the maximum benefits. Now, given that everybody's different, there's some individuals that perhaps would require a little bit more of strength training, you know, than others. It depends on many different factors that we have to take into account to design a prescription that is adequate and that will promote the most benefits. So everybody's a little bit different.
I'm assuming also that it depends on where you're starting. If you are not very fit to begin with, you have to start with a
A
little
lower
bit,
dose.
a lower dose, something
Abs-
you can handle.
oh, absolutely. And we started slow, we start progressing. We try always to create a dose response of the exercise, but it has to be crafted in such that you don't want the novice, the individual just engage in regular exercise to get too sore or be uncomfortable because otherwise they won't come back.
So, Dr. Battaglini, I've asked experts for years, what's the best exercise? And you know what they always say? It's the one that you're going to do.
No doubt.
And I remember many years ago, probably 30, 40 years ago, my internist said, well, Joe, you know what I like to do is I like to run. Maybe you should take up running. And I paused and I thought, and I said, no way.
Not going to happen.
It's never going to. I hate running. It's just not my thing. But I can play tennis for 2 or 3 hours and absolutely have the time of my life. And at the end, I can have, 10 or 15,000 steps just on the tennis court because I've been running back and forth and up and down and around and about. And that's my exercise rather than going out and running in, the side of the road and inhaling all those toxic fumes from the cars. But I see people doing that. And okay, cool. Good on you. But that ain't for me.
Right. No, I have to agree. The experts would tell whatever you feel the most comfortable with, that's the exercise that you will be able to, engage for a prolonged period of time. If there's one thing that I learned, throughout my entire career with exercising, cancer, or just helping people to live a healthier lifestyle, knowing that different exercises promote different adaptations, right? Strength training will be very specific in building or minimizing loss of muscle mass as we age, great benefits on your bone remodeling, while aerobic will be working on your cardiovascular system. We understand very well the acute and chronic adaptations of those different types of exercise, right? But what I learned that really makes a difference, one, is what you said, right? Whatever works best for you. And two, it is the consistency of doing something over a prolonged period of time. It doesn't matter if you're going to run for 2, 3 weeks, great, and then you never run again. It doesn't matter if you go to the gym and lift weights very heavy, and then you hate, and then you don't do that anymore. So what we need to do is really the consistency of doing, even if it's a little bit every day, for years. That's where the most benefits is believed to be accomplished. In cancer, certainly, is that consistency of being able to do, your training regularly over time without overdoing yourselves. So, but the key question that I have for every exercise physiologist, and I challenge my own students, we have been failing throughout the years. I'm guilty as charged that we can't get, our society to become more physically active and maintain that for years. We have failed. If you look at the data, 68% of adults in the US and 17% of the children, they're obese, and less than half, 50%, meet the guidelines set forth by for physical activity guidelines. And where are we failing? How come we can't get?
Well, we have made it so easy to get places without using our muscles, and we have made it so hard to actually use our muscles to get places.
That's true.
If you want to travel in Chapel Hill, you probably can. You can get on a bicycle and go from here to there. In Durham, it's much harder, and in some big cities, it's dangerous.
Hmm.
You know, what
Yeah.
else is sort of interesting to me is that we have spoken with experts in the field of longevity,
Uh huh.
and they often will describe your original homeland, where your parents came from, in Italy. And they say, well, there are people who live in remote areas and they take care of their sheep and they climb the mountain every day to take the sheep out to the pasture. And when you talk to them about their exercise program, they look at you.
Like, what are you
y-
talking
You're
about?
on a different planet. I mean, I don't
Right.
exercise.
I just live.
I live my life, and every day I walk miles
Right.
up and down the mountains. And these are people in their 80s and 90s, and they're in amazing health. And they're blue zoners. That is to say, they live to a ripe old age. And in this country, we see people going to the gym and with grim faces, working out on particularly hard equipment. And the difference between people who live in a mountainous area of Italy and somebody who goes to the local gym, it's a whole different world. They're breathing fresh air out there in Italy,
Yes.
and here they're just sucking up all the fumes.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. But we still, right? We're very blessed in the United States because we got parks, we got different areas that we could potentially
Mhm.
use. Like you said, in big cities is more difficult. But the key is really to move. Just to give you an idea, sedentary behaviors are costing us $100 billion a year with the development or its association with the sedentary behavior and associations with chronic diseases. And it doesn't take much to reap the benefits of exercise. When you talk about exercise, perhaps the stigma is that you need to go to the gym and sweat and go hard. No, not necessarily. With minimum amounts of exercise for somebody that is sedentary, that can go long ways. And I think it needs to be the message.
I've got an idea.
Oh, I'm gamed.
Here's my idea. Every computer has to shut down for 20 minutes every hour, because how many of us, myself included, totally guilty as charged, sit behind a computer screen not for half an hour, not for an hour,
Hours.
for hours. If the
Yes.
computer had this automatic shutdown that forced us to, oh, well, I can't work on my computer for 20 more minutes. I better go out and do something. I'm afraid it's not going to be adopted, but there's an idea for you.
Listen, this is a tremendous idea. I love that. As a matter of fact, I used to have a grad student. He's now doing a postdoc degree training in Canada. That came one day with me with an idea, and he was very reluctant to tell me. And I said, "No, please tell me." And he said, "Well, I would like to get an app on the phone that every 30 or 40 minutes, the most fun music that the person likes, remind them that they need to stand up and dance.
Uh-huh.
Dance to the music for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then go back to work." But the app would remind them by playing their favorite songs. Not only that will get you out of the chair and make you a little bit less sedentary, but also brings a good mood. You're
Yeah.
listening to songs that gives you good vibes and good memories. And he was a little afraid to tell me about the idea. I love that idea, just as yours. The computer will shut down. You can't do it. If we could do something like that, right? I'm sure that will be impactful. I like that idea.
You mentioned strength training
Hmm.
and bone strength. There are tens of millions of women in this country who have osteopenia, which is
Hmm.
pre
Osteoporosis.
osteoporosis.
Hmm.
And we have a lot of drugs, some of which have some pretty serious side
Side
effects, and
effects.
they're also pricey. And there are literally millions of men who have been diagnosed with prostate cancer and have been treated with what we call ADT,
Mhm.
anti-androgen
Deprivation
It's
deprivation
androgen deprivation
therapy,
therapy.
Mhm.
which means that we are
They also have weak bones.
reducing their amount of testosterone dramatically, not in some cases for years. And the lack of testosterone is also a risk factor for osteoporosis. So they're vulnerable too.
Mhm.
How could you design a program if you were in charge that would help strengthen bones for men and for women?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there are researchers doing that currently. One of my colleagues that are working with actually metastatic prostate cancer patients at UNC has been very successful in maintaining or even gaining muscle mass in patients that are undergoing androgen deprivation therapy. So those new therapies that are treated now, are so potent that you have undetected levels of testosterone in the body, which is believed to be one of the major factors in being able to build muscle mass, right? Well, he's proven that even without testosterone, we still can maintain, preserve muscle mass in those particular patients, through resistance training. So we know that the resistance training can be significantly beneficial for females that are undergoing already, experiencing osteopenia. As we age, we all will experience osteopenia at one point in time, and hopefully we move enough that we know we don't become osteoporotic. But the resistance training has been shown over and over to be a very feasible and very efficacious therapy for the maintenance of bone health and also preservation of muscle mass.
Well, help me understand that, because I think there was a concept that you had to be jarring, bouncing. You had to be jolting your
For
bones.
bones,
You
right?
had to
Weight
jump up and
bearing.
down. You had to be doing all sorts of things that would somehow make the bones respond to
Sure.
that kind of experience. So, dancing, for example, the polka or flamenco or
Hmm.
whatever is your favorite dance, that was going to work. Skipping rope, but that strength training was so sort of gradual that it wouldn't have any impact on your bones, just on your muscle. Was that a mistake?
Well, I believe so. I'm sure so. And I'll give a very classical example. Swimmers in general, okay, in the past, now they do weight training and they train really hard in the gym. But in the past, weight training was not really a good practice, in swimming training, right?
Hmm.
Swimmers would be in the pool swimming, and because this is a non-weight bearing activity, right? You are floating in the water, you're not stimulating that shear stress on the bones to produce bone remodeling and continue to pack bones, because males and females, right? Males will continue to have packing the bones and developing that bone all the way up to about their 20s, 21st, and then start going down right that. And females, perhaps maybe a little bit later or earlier on. And that's where the exercise and calcium supplementation will come in together, not only one or the other. It has to be a combination of both to try to preserve that bone mass or bone mineral content as much as we possibly can. But in swimmers, it was interesting that I had a colleague, exercise physiologist, one of the top exercise physiologists in the world, well respected, citation winner at the American College of Sports Medicine. I'm talking about a top scientist in the area who was a swimmer, and he swam his whole life. At noon, he would go to the pool at UNC, and you would see him swimming all the way to older age. And when he retired, he called me and said, Claudio, can you do a DEXA scan? I'm concerned about my skeleton. And yeah, so I ran a DEXA scan on him in my lab, and we found significant lower levels of bone mineral content and density for his age. And he has been an athlete his whole
Hmm.
life, but
Hmm.
in the water.
Yeah.
So we changed the whole regimen and put him in the weight training room 3, 4 times a week. He starts swimming a little bit less. And the physicians saw some progress. I'm not talking about significant gain in bone mass anymore, because at a older age that is very complicated. But to your point, is the weight training has been now, and I have been measuring some swimmers, that do both the swimming and the weight training, and they look much healthier athletes overall than they were in the past when they only swam. So yeah, the importance of weight training for bone remodeling, and it's extremely important, extremely important. So as a matter of fact, for older individuals, I highly recommend that hitting the gym, diminish a little bit, perhaps your time just doing aerobic exercise and hit the gym. Let's go do some functional training. Let's get some weight in that skeleton, and that seems to be, the message, for those individuals.
Dr. Battaglini, it seems like what you are doing at the University of North Carolina is so valuable. Is this happening across the country at cancer centers everywhere? Are insurance companies saying, oh, this is great. We're going to keep people from having recurrences. Let's pay for exercise programs. And are your oncology colleagues prescribing exercise post-cancer treatment?
I was expecting this question to come. It's a great question. We do have great people across the United States studying cancer and exercise, and some of them have been very progressive in trying to implement cancer centers to exercise cancer programs to really, treat these patients and provide them with exercise. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, up to now, there's no code for reimbursement from insurance companies or Medicare, Medicaid, that will pay for those expenses.
So that's a barrier.
There is definitely a big barrier, because when you finish the treatment, you're hanging with a tag there, a bill of $300,000, right? And suddenly you're gonna still gonna pay out of pocket to exercise. A lot of patients don't have the capacity to do that, but there's a lot of push from top researchers in the United States, going into our congressmen to try to change that. And as soon as we change that, I think this will be a game changer in the world of exercise oncology and being able to provide those services to the
That's
patients.
so exciting, because cancer treatments today are so expensive. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes as much as $1 million. And golly, an exercise program is such an affordable and such a big payback. It needs to be incorporated into this whole process.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Battaglini, for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today. We love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you very much, and it has been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Dr. Claudio Battaglini. He is Professor of Exercise Physiology and Director of the Graduate Exercise Physiology Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Battaglini is co-director of the Exercise Oncology Laboratory in the Department of Exercise and Sport Science. He's also a member of the UNC Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center.
We spoke earlier with Dr. Benjamin Levine, professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center and a member of the Division of Cardiology. He holds the Distinguished Professorship in Exercise Sciences. He's the founding director of the Institute for Exercise and Environmental Medicine at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital, Dallas, where he also holds the S. Finley Ewing Jr. Chair for Wellness and the Harry S. Moss Hart Chair for Cardiovascular Research.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wodarski engineered. Dave Graydon edits our interviews. B.J. Liederman composed our theme music.
This show is a co-production of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC, with the People's Pharmacy.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Cocoa Via Dietary Supplements. Cocoa-flavanol supplements that support cognitive and cardiovascular health, made with a proven concentrated flavanol extract. More information at cocovia.com.
Today's show is number 1414. You can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com. That's where you can share your comments about today's interview. You can also reach us through email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
Our interviews are available through your favorite podcast provider. This week, the podcast will have some extra information on how exercise can help with blood pressure control. We also discuss the benefits of strength and aerobic training and the importance of the right dose of exercise. What exercises can help people strengthen their bones? You'll find the podcast on our website on Monday morning.
At peoplespharmacy.com, you can sign up for our free online newsletter to get the latest news about important health stories. When you subscribe, you also have regular access to information about our weekly podcast, so you can find out ahead of time what topics we'll be covering. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next week. Thank you for listening to the People's Pharmacy Podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure to bring you our award-winning program week in and week out. But producing and distributing this show as a free podcast takes time and costs money.
If you like what we do and you'd like to help us continue to produce high-quality, independent healthcare journalism, please consider chipping in.
All you have to do is go to peoplespharmacy.com/donate.
Whether it's just one time or a monthly donation, you can be part of the team that makes this show possible. Thank you for your continued loyalty and support. We couldn't make our show without you.